Y'all know what time it is. It's another prediction video time with yours truly, Breezy Mar, better known as the Puncher's Point. Of course, we got Terence Crawford versus Israil Madrimov at the BMO Stadium in Los Angeles. And this will be for the WBA title. And this will be Crawford's 154-pound debut fight. Wow, there's a lot to unpack. You know, we've had this conversation off podcast before, me and Mario. This is going to be a really interesting fight, especially since this will be his debut fight going to 154. Of course, we know Terence Crawford's last fight was July 20th against Errol the True Spence Jr., which he had a dominating performance with a ninth round stoppage, solidify himself as the best welterweight at that time. Now Crawford is taking his skills up to 154 along with the other contenders and champions. Now, before I pass over to my boy Mario, I want to just jump straight into it. No lollygagging, no beating behind the bush, okay? First, we want to get into Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford, one of the best switch hitters in the sport of boxing. Great instincts, great power, can box you from the inside to the outside. I'm gonna tell y'all this right quick, right? Because a lot of people they tend to forget that Terence Crawford can actually box. In case y'all don't understand, we did a recent collab and we spoke on the skill set that Terence Crawford possesses. We spoke on that Terence Crawford can box. It's just a lot of people they know him more so for being that aggressive instinct fighter who can catch you at any given time, who can turn up on you at any time. And once he gets you hurt, he can stop you at any given time. But a lot of people don't understand Terence Crawford can fight against with stances. Not only that, too, but Terence Crawford is very vicious to the body. Not only that, too, but Terence Crawford also has a nice, slick head movement, which a lot of people don't give him credit for. He does have head movement, but for the foreseeable more future part of Terence Crawford's career, he's always used his footwork and his pure instincts. Now, one thing I will say about Terence Crawford too is that his time to start is a little bit slow. And I've said this in the past about guys like Canelo, Lomachenko, Tank Davis, they tend to start out slow. Not only that too, but early on in Terence Crawford's career, Terence Crawford had a habit of kind of like keeping his hands low and throwing those hooks in kind of like in loops, throwing those hooks in ways to where he could be countered. And if you watch the David Avanesian fight, there was times, even though Terence Crawford was guarding and keeping the high guard on Avanesian, there was times where Avanesian was bringing those punches up and catching him. Now, this is your 154-pound debut. You don't want to go into this fight with a guy like Israil Madrimov and take a certain kind of shots, especially with the power he possesses in both hands. Now, we will be getting to Israil Madrimov, but as far as Terence Crawford, that's my breakdown for Terence Crawford. I'll pass it over to you, Mario.
The thing with Terence Crawford is, I mean, when we're talking about boxers, he, he's got it all, man. And not only that, but the guy is a pure athlete. I think that's one of his biggest strengths, is the guy's a pure athlete. I mean, I've seen this guy do almost anything. I've seen him chuck a football 60 yards. I've seen this guy hoop and basketball. You know what I'm saying? He's a very good wrestler as well, which a lot of people forget about. I mean, let's be real. Terence Crawford is that type of guy that was in high school that was a star athlete in every single sport. He was one of those guys that went to gym class and you already knew he was the top athlete. He got picked first in every single thing. You played kickball, he was the guy who got picked first. Terence Crawford is an insanely good fighter. I've said it millions of times. In my opinion, he's a top five fighter of all time. He's a top five boxer of all time, and nobody can argue with me about that. I don't care what anybody says. I mean, what he's done in this sport, I mean, first ever two-time undisputed male champion. And you think about two division champion, undefeated 40-0. His last nine fights, Breezy, have all ended in knockout. And the question is, can he make it 10? You know, Here's what I will say. The other strengths that he has as well, like you said, he's one of the best switch hitters, if not the best switch hitter that we have seen in boxing, not just today, but in history. The other thing about Terence Crawford is he's very relentless and he's a big pressure fighter. Once he gets you hurt, he's not that guy that's going to knock you out right away. He's that guy that's going to torture you and pummel you for round after round after round. I mean, there were many moments in that Errol Spence Jr. fight that he could have stopped him earlier, but he kept it going. He kept battering him and battering him. And Terence Crawford, he's very calculated as well. He's a guy who's an extremely good counterpuncher. I mean, his footwork, like you mentioned, is off the charts. He can slip and dodge and move punches. He knows how to cut angles. I mean, you think about your favorite fighters and what they can do. Terence Crawford is the whole package. Now, you may be asking if he's the whole package, then what's his weaknesses? His weaknesses is this. I need y'all to go back and watch the Sean Porter fight. In the Sean Porter fight, he was losing. Okay. And it wasn't by choice. It wasn't like he was waiting and picking apart and calculating. He was losing because Sean Porter was bringing him the fight. Sean Porter would come forward and hit him with some punches, and Sean Porter would get hit and continuously come forward. Now, Sean Porter's mistake in that fight was it turned into coming forward to swinging wildly and being reckless, and then he got counterpunched. If you go back and you watch the early part of that fight, Sean Porter starts everything off with a jab, and he's pushing him back, and you can tell he's got him against those ropes. He's hitting him with the jab, and he's using the jab to come forward. Now, Terence Crawford isn't the type of guy that's just going to let you throw 5 punches on him, and he's not going to punch back. You have to earn those 5 punches. So what happened? He would start off with the jab, and he would push Terence Crawford back. Crawford would try to throw a counterpunch, and he would miss because Sean Porter's head movement was very good in that fight, early fight. Okay, I just want to correct myself right there. As Sean Porter would dodge his attack, he would continuously come forward. Now, what's the difference between that and Errol Spence Jr.? Errol Spence Jr. had somewhat of a right idea. Come forward, throw a three-punch combination, and back out. Don't give Terence Crawford time to land a counterpunch. Don't give Terence Crawford time to use his footwork. Don't give Terence Crawford time to push the pace and pressure him. I think the way you got to beat Terence Crawford is do a little bit of mix of what Spence did and what Porter did, which is Spence early in the fight, throwing those 2-3 punch combinations. Porter early in the fight, pushing the pace, pushing the pressure, and backing him up against those ropes. But I think that what a lot of people end up failing in later on in those fights is they get that confused. They get a little bit too greedy and they get a little bit too extra. Sean Porter starts coming forward instead of with a jab that's a safe punch, and it's one of the most important punches in boxing, like we have mentioned many times before. Instead of him coming forward and starting off with the jab and using the jab to get inside Terence Crawford, he starts throwing hooks to try to come in. What happens? Well, you miss those hooks. Terence Crawford's got a good opening to hit you. Errol Spence, he got comfortable a little bit in that second round coming forward. What happened? He ducked his head down a little bit trying to hit that body, and Terence Crawford countered him, knocked him down. Those are the mistakes that Terence Crawford will capitalize on. And I think that those are weaknesses of his, is him getting pushed back, guys coming forward. If Madrimov can take a punch and he can use his jab and he can use his awkward fight stance, which we'll get to later, if he can use those types of things, use his feints, if he can use those types of things against Crawford, it's going to be a rough night for Crawford. I'm not saying he's going to lose, but Crawford's going to have a hard time. He's going to have to get that out the mud. So when you really think about it, I would say the weaknesses for Terence Crawford is that right hook has always been a punch that he's kind of gotten hit with a little bit. You can target his body a little bit, but be careful. Don't overdo it. And if a fighter can use their jab efficiently to get into the inside of Terence Crawford and prevent that foot movement and prevent that athleticism from Terence Crawford, I think you can make it a rough fight with him.
Great breakdown. Now on to Israil Madrimov. Now, I'm going to say this right now, right? This is actually going to be even more interesting than I thought. Because I just thought back down to the whole breakdown and watching his highlights. It's going to be crazy interesting. Let me tell you about Israil Madrimov. Israil Madrimov has insane foot speed. Let me go ahead and throw that out there. Crazy fast on his feet. Slick with it too. When you're in the inside with him and you're trying to throw combinations, he's real quick to slip out the way and counter you. Another thing too, he possesses power in both of his hands. Not only that too, but he's very aggressive to the body. Something Terence Crawford is going to be on the look for that. He's very aggressive to the body. Now, about Israil Madrimov, that's a weakness, is the way he throws his punches. It's kind of like a very, very awkward style. He throws his punches, dips his head in, and even with the guard, he kind of does something a little bit similar to Errol Spence. Not how he throws his punches, but the way he dips his head in after he's throwing those punches, the way he dips his head in and use his whole upper body to put his head in the inside. We saw how that went last year in July. That is a huge weakness, even for somebody like a Terence Crawford to pick apart. Terence Crawford is a very, like I said, he doesn't start off fast, but when he starts calculating and downloading data, he starts calculating and downloading data. Another thing too is this: he doesn't have head move. Well, I don't want to say he doesn't have head movement. He might have head movement, but he does not use it. I feel like it's only so much you can really do with your feet, especially when you're in there with a guy that's as talented as get this Terence Crawford. Now, like I said, he does have power in both of his hands. So, and he can counter punch you too. Don't get it twisted. He can counter punch you too, along with Terence Crawford. These are both counter punchers. That's why I said this fight is going to be really interesting because it's probably going to be a pick 'em, break 'em down type fight. You throw, I counter. You throw, I counter. I counter, you throw. It's going to be kind of be like mano to mano. But as far as like stylistically, it just he'll I don't I'm not a fan of the over the extended punches that he throws and dipping his whole upper body and his head into. But as far as his strengths and whatnot, the guy is real fast on his feet, and he knows how to counter punch you. I just like Terence Crawford. Not saying he's as good or as skillful as Terence Crawford, but just like Crawford, he does know how to use his angles, use his power, use his hook, power in both hands, and does go to the body. But the concerning red flags is the not really using too much head movement, not really using too much outside fighting, and not only that too, but like I said, dipping his head in when he's throwing those punches.
Remember when we announced this fight and I said we don't know what we're getting with Madrimov because we just haven't really seen much of him unless you were a big fan of the amateurs, then you know about his 350 wins in the amateurs. But we were like, he could be like the Ivan Drago to Rocky, like or Ivan Drago to Apollo, where he just comes in and and he can do what he got to do to win this fight, and we see how dominant he really is. Well, after watching his highlights, here's what I got to say about Israil Madrimov. He has got to be one of the most awkward fighters I have seen in a very long time, but awkward in a good way. See, the reason why I say that is because everybody talks about his unorthodox stance and his awkward stance, but it works for him. I mean, the guy is 10-0 with 7 knockouts. It works for him because Madrimov has a lot of the skills that are needed to beat Terence Crawford. And I mean, I would again, I'm saying this right now. I wouldn't be surprised if he beat Terence Crawford. I'm not saying he's going to beat Terence Crawford, but I wouldn't be surprised over that outcome. Y'all can go in the comments and hate all y'all want. I do not care. I didn't say he's going to beat Terence Crawford. I said I wouldn't be surprised if he did beat Terence Crawford. Here's the reason why I say this. Breezy mentioned how fast his footwork is, but it's not just about how fast his footwork is. It's about how he uses it. You talked about him cutting angles. It's not even about that. The thing is with Madrimov has this ability. He has an awkward fight stance, but he has this ability to change it as well. Crazy enough, I've seen in some of these highlights, if you go watch Madrimov in some of these fights, Madrimov, he shows a good boxing stance. There's some times where he shows that good pure boxing stance and he switches right back to his own. He's that type of guy that doesn't like to give you a clear look. He's that type of guy that is very twitchy and he loves his feints, and that is something that could open up Terence Crawford. We haven't seen Terence Crawford fight a guy like Madrimov, who's so awkward and unpredictable and doesn't give you the basic game plan that every fighter does. He doesn't give you the same exact stance. He changes it up. He switches it a little bit. What I like about Madrimov is he's a guy that can beat you with any punch. He can beat you with the left. He can beat you with the right. He's got this weird jab, and it almost looks, and I'm not disgracing him in this way. It almost looks like the KSI jab where he just bounces and flicks his hand, but he does it to, an actual good standard. See, the thing is with Madrimov, when he flicks his jab, he's flicking it. He's not throwing it like an average boxer. He's flicking his jab. So it's not it's not a jab where he's throwing it like this. He's throwing it like this. That's the way he's throwing the jab. And it's very, very interesting because a jab like that can allow him to keep his distance away from Crawford. Now, what happens if Madrimov decides to get greedy like all these other guys did, like Spence and Porter? If he comes forward and he leaves his hands down like he does, he's gonna get clipped. That's the thing. Guys like that, you're taking a risk. You're relying on your athleticism. But if your athleticism can't save you in those moments, there's trouble there. He almost reminds me, not the way he fights or anything like that, but just kind of the way he approaches a fight, relentless, coming forward, everything like that. He almost reminds me of Triple G. He reminds me a lot of Triple G when Triple G was hitting the scene. See, Madrimov's 10-0 with 7 knockouts, and a lot of people might be thinking, well, how come somebody like Madrimov is already a champion at 154? When you're a really good amateur, you're automatically shot up into space. You're automatically going to get the big fights. There is no fights where you're going to get guys who are like 2-10 or 2-2, or you're not going to get guys with negative records. If you have a great amateur background, they're going to throw you right into the fire. A perfect example of that, Lomachenko. I mean, think about how long it took Lomachenko to become a third division champion because Lomachenko had a great amateur background, just like Madrimov does. See, with Madrimov, because he's so unpredictable, because he's so awkward, because of that amateur background, he's already considered a threat. The thing is with Madrimov, the problem is it's all a question of when you come forward and you leave your head down, is Terence Crawford going to take advantage of that? And I think he will. And that's the biggest weakness right there. The other biggest weakness as well is I do feel like Terence Crawford could beat him with a jab. I think Terence Crawford's got a very good jab, and I think that he can beat him with that jab and kind of slow Madrimov down or prevent him from using his footwork. Breezy said it best. This is going to be a battle of counterpunch versus counterpunch, athleticism versus athleticism. The one with the most athleticism is going to win this fight. That looks like Crawford. The one with the best counterpunching ability is going to win this fight. That looks like Crawford. The one with the best footwork is going to win this fight. That looks like Madrimov. The one who's the best at cutting angles is going to win this fight. That looks like Madrimov. Madrimov has the tools to beat Terence Crawford. Don't get that mistaken. That's why I'm not shocked if he can do it. But the problem is, A, Madrimov has not fought somebody like a Terence Crawford, and B, we've seen that awkward fight style work for him. But will it work against Terence Crawford? That's the big question right there. And that's going to be answered come August 3rd. It's that fight style. And that's why it's so, so interesting to see what's going to happen, man. Because I don't know how Crawford's going to be able to handle that style, going to be able to handle that unpredictability, man, because he is an unpredictable fighter. You don't know what he can throw. And what I also like about Madrimov that's very similar to Sean Porter is he Sean Porter, if you looked at him when he was coming forward, he had like a very low stance and he would pop up and throw a power punch. Madrimov has that same exact ability. He's that same guy. He will go low and pop up and throw a power punch. He will use his feints to try to get Terence Crawford to move his hands a little bit. And if Terence Crawford keeps on falling for those feints, if he falls for the unpredictability of Madrimov, it's going to be a tough fight. So that would be my breakdown of Madrimov. Is Terence Crawford gonna be able to handle that style, or is it gonna be too unpredictable for him? Now, with that being said, Breezy, do you have any final thoughts, anything that you would like to say before we get to the betting odds?
I will say this though. I will say this though. You know, like I said, this is gonna be really interesting for Crawford, especially since we knew he kind of like made references of him being too big for 147, especially after the Spence fight. Sort of to see him going up to his division is really interesting. To see what does at this division. Because I remember people saying he was going to do this, do that, and the other at 147, and he did it. So can't wait to see what he does at this division.
Now on to the betting odds. Terence Crawford is a minus 700 favorite, with Madrimov being a plus 480 underdog. If you go look at the methods to victory, the most likely outcome that people have is Terence Crawford knocking out Madrimov. That is at minus 150, but the least likely outcome will be Madrimov winning by points, which is at plus 1200. So with that being said, Breezy, let's go straight into the predictions. Do you have an upset? Do you got the favorite winning? Do you take the favorable outcome? Who you got winning and how you see it happening?
Give me Terence Crawford by late stoppage. I say probably about right like 10 rounds. I'll say this right. But Israil Madrimov, right? I think, like I said, Crawford is a slow starter. Once the bell rings, those early rounds, he's just gathering what he can gather. Might throw a jab here and there, you know what I'm saying? Might throw some feints in there, just so it don't be too lopsided on the card. So early on, I think it's going to be a testing factor with Crawford, kind of gauge where, you know, Israel's going to how he's going to throw his punches. What is it going to look like? Trying to gauge the rage, the arm reach. Try to get adapted to the style like he does like he does in the other fights. And I think Israil Madrimov, I think he's going to have some nice little success with the jab. And I think I'll say by round 3, 4, Crawford gonna start picking it up. And then come those middle rounds between 6, like the second part of the fight, 6, 7, Crawford's gonna turn it up a little bit. And I think 8th, 9th round, we might even see Madrimov get hurt. And I think 10th round, I think Terence Crawford competitiveness, athleticism, and just brute force and skills and IQ is gonna get the best of Madrimov, and I think we're gonna see a Terence Crawford TKO for his 154-pound debut.
Crawford winning, but I think it's going to be by unanimous decision. I think this is going to be the guy that Terence Crawford is going to be able to knock out. And the reason why I say that is because A, I'm taking a risk on this one because, well, not really actually, because if you really think about it, Madrimov, I don't think he's been knocked out in his career regardless, amateur or pros. I don't think he's been knocked out. So you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I looked at his record. I don't think he got knocked out. And most of his losses were either split decision or majority decision. So when you really look at it, I don't think Terence Crawford is going to be able to knock him out. I think he might figure him out, but I think it's going to be too late to knock him out. And I do feel like this is going to be, if I had to grade it, if I had to predict a grade or like how the scorecards are going to go, I'd probably say like a 117, 111 Crawford. I do think this is going to be a fight that a lot of people are going to say, maybe Crawford isn't going to be able to be that guy to beat Canelo. Maybe Crawford can't beat Booz. It's going to be one of those fights where they're going to start putting a little bit of doubt as to whether or not Crawford is going to be able to beat the guys that everybody was talking about him beating. But I do think Terence Crawford is going to come out with this win. I do think it's going to be a decisive win. 117, 111, something around there, like eight rounds to 4, 9 rounds to 3, something around there. But I think that this is going to be a fight where Madrimov's unpredictability is going to take Crawford some time to figure it out. And I think it's going to take longer than 4 rounds or 5 rounds. I think Crawford will probably figure him out around like the 7th round. Maybe he'll get one knockdown, but I can definitely see Terence Crawford starting slow and kind of struggling to figure him out. And I think that once he does figure him out, I think that Israil Madrimov is going to have enough time to hang in there and kind of stay in the fight to make it a unanimous decision for Terence Crawford, and Madrimov will probably go the distance. So I got Terence Crawford by decision. I could be wrong, but then again, like I said before, I wouldn't be surprised if Madrimov uses those tools to beat him. I would not be surprised. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think Terence Crawford is just too good of a fighter, and I think he's going to pull out the decisive win on August 3rd.
It's the Puncher's Point. We live every week, Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and some Saturdays. Make sure y'all stay tuned in with the X and Instagram. Make sure y'all tap in with the podcast. For anybody that's not on YouTube, you want to listen to it on the podcast, we are still on the podcasting app. So don't get it twisted. We still are on there. We still upload on there. Don't get it twisted like a press. So you can still listen on there when you're at work or when you're doing your daily jog or daily workout. So make sure y'all stay tuned in with the content. We constantly dropping episodes for y'all to watch and tune in. If you love this great sport of boxing, continue watching. Continue commenting. Keep coming back and watching. We're going to keep dropping these news and updates and fight announcements on y'all. But make sure y'all stay on point with the Puncher's Point.